Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, is taking many big gambles, taking a lot of big risks when it comes to properties that have quite the history behind them. Just this morning with The Mandalorian, total reset of that franchise, of that series. And Indiana Jones, well, the budget there is about to be so bloated, the runtime so grandiose, we're trying to figure out what is going on. Explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of that culture curve. It's what we do each and every day, right here on the WDW Pro channel. And today we're trying to keep you ahead of the culture curve in terms of what is going to happen with Indiana Jones 5 and what impact does it have on a number of huge Hollywood big shots. We're talking about people like Kathleen Kennedy. She's practically Hollywood royalty. We're talking about Harrison Ford, the same there, John Williams, etc. So many people perhaps swan-songing, exiting their careers, or entering the twilight of their careers with this film. This could be the last big hurrah for many of them, and it appears that Kathleen Kennedy is taking many gambles with it. Big gambles. Will they pay off? Well, we don't know yet. Joining us to help us understand what is going on here is the one and only Script Doctor, returning to the channel by common demand from so many of you out there loving the content that Script Doctor has been involved in. Script Doctor, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back, Pro. It's a pleasure to be here. And for everyone that's listening and has made those wonderful comments that I've seen on previous videos, not just with myself involved, thank you so much for enjoying the stuff that's put out here on this channel.
Absolutely. And we do enjoy having someone who is in the industry able to give sort of those industry-specific thoughts and opinions. And so we'll be doing that in just a moment. Folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about that notification bell. We covet your comments, so drop one down below. All right, Script, we're going to start with an article that is covering something that has been known for a while. We're going to add a little extra context to it. This by Stephen Barker over out of Screen Rant. Indiana Jones 5's budget is setting it up for failure, but not how you'd think. Indy 5 looks like the most epic indie adventure yet, but that comes at a price, and what it needs to earn to break even is unbelievable. Now, this is something that we've actually covered over in the Valiant Renegade channel before, and it's particularly interesting to me because they're going to be pulling some numbers that came from one of the trades, and that number actually is inaccurate. We'll talk about it in just a second. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has a budget that is set to give it a major challenge when it comes to its box office success. The fifth movie in the Indiana Jones franchise looks absolutely epic in scope and is set to be the biggest adventure for the archaeologist yet. But that has led to a budget that raises some red flags. Yes, indeedy. Unfortunately, given the hesitance about yet another Indiana Jones movie following the disliked Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, this means the film could be Temple of Doomed. Sorry, I changed that there. Sorry, it's a terrible joke. All right, so what it talks about, we'll get right to it, is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny's budget is a massive $295 million. Now, the reason that we believe that is inaccurate is because that is not taking into consideration, we believe, and this is based on the research that Valiant Renegade did, it's not taking into account the currency exchange rate at the time that the budgets were set. And because of that, the belief is that actually this thing is more expensive. It's somewhere approximating $320 million, which is still even more insane. And so, Script, I'm just curious, what in the world is going to be in this movie that could possibly make it have that kind of value? Did they de-age everybody in the film?
That's a good question, but there's also something you also have to realize when it comes to Hollywood budgets. So, for instance, this Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, it's ostensibly a United Kingdom film. It's being done in Pinewood Studios, UK. It's all based. There's no real U.S. dollars involved. It's all British pound sterling.
And that's for tax reasons, correct?
For tax reasons, and also, a little bit a part of the distribution deal. Sometimes you can get easier stuff distributed to certain countries if it's a British made. Usually just politics on that side of things. But the other thing to consider is that not just for tax reasons, but they also have subsidiaries, and they have subsidiary studios, and they have investments in various banks and whatnot throughout the whole world, especially a studio as big as Disney. And they do this so that they can get easy lines of credit or loans from those local banks and not have to pay as much interest on them, or they'd have special amenities with the condition of the loan, so that they're not going to be losing as much money. Or if in the event of a bomb, they can write it off and it doesn't actually negatively impact the parent company. And the reason you have to look carefully at budgets like this is that when they get their lines of credit, it's done at the start of production based on the budget proposed at the time. So let's say hypothetically, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was initially budgeted for $220 million US, but it was be whatever that conversion is for British pound sterlings at the time before principal photography took place. So we're talking about a couple of years ago. And at that point, that's what they're borrowing against from those dollars from a couple of years ago. And that dollar amount that they borrowed does not change even with inflation, because again, if I took say a $1,000 loan in 2017, I would still only owe $1,000, but there would be interest on top of that, and that would be and that interest can change due to inflation, or unless the terms on that loan are set so that they don't change regardless of inflation, which studios like Disney have the power to do. The budget doesn't grow. The only time the budget grows is when they go back to the bank to get more lines of credit to account for additional costs. Now, what that dollar value is depends on when they pulled it at what point of the year. So again, the $295
This does seem like a film that likely they had to go back to the banks, probably, given the fact that we had such a delay. I mean, this is truly, number one, this film was a Hail Mary from the beginning, just to try to get a nearly octogenarian onto the film as an action star is something. But then they also had the situation where they put Harrison Ford on top of a train doing his own stunts to some degree. He was injured, and that turned into a multi-month delay that had people stranded in other countries. All the while, we were in the situation that we've been worldwide with viruses and such. So you can just see how that would have ballooned out of control potentially.
To a degree, insurance would cover a number of those things, but mark my words, the insurance companies would do everything they can not to pay that. So the question is how much money has the Disney company really put forward? Technically none, because again, it's all borrowed, but they're on the hook for that. And so the $295 might be a charitable figure by the trades. I think that because they've had delays and because they most likely had to go back, especially with some of the additional reshoots and then bringing people back outside of as part of their contracts for those reshoots or for the re-edits or what have you, they would then have to go and pull more money to do that. So it could be quite a large budget at the end of the day. And with those reshoots come the demand for post-production and special effects studios to come in to help speed up the process so that they can make the release date. And those special effects studios have a premium for tighter schedules because they essentially have to delay some of the other projects that they're currently contracted out to in order to make up the demand of the bigger studio. And in order to do that, it's just good business to basically say, oh, we're working on, say, a Sony picture right now, and it's going to take us 7 weeks to get this done. But Disney has come in and says, hey, we need this done in 3 weeks. We're going to pay you this extra amount of dollars. Can you do it? They say yes, because why refuse the work? And then at the worst case scenario, they might have to end up paying a penalty to the Sony production with regards to what they're doing because they took 1 extra week and pulled a bunch of staff off their project to complete this other one on a tighter deadline. So those complications are also something to think about when studios have extensive reshoots and then are starting to buy up contracts with effects studios to meet their release date. So it has a ripple effect, and it also comes with a hefty price tag because, again, when you're buying time that's kind of reserved for someone else at another job, you got to pay a lot in order to get that time.
Absolutely. Now we're looking at a picture currently on Screen Rant of Harrison Ford, and we do believe this is Harrison Ford. It is not, in my opinion, a CGI remasking of another actor with Harrison Ford's face. And there's some indicators that show that to us, including his shirt, his rib cage that you can see. There are particular identifiers that suggest this is truly Harrison Ford. Now, the interesting thing to me about this picture, and we just stumbled upon it, it's pure coincidence, but I believe that this was taken days before his injury because they had set up the shoot during the day in Scotland to do this New York kind of setting, right? It's supposed to be the ticker tape parade. And following his injury then, of course, he had to be replaced with another actor, a stunt double, a body double, and then those actors had Harrison Ford's face digitally placed with, however you want to call it, deep fake or CGI, whatever you want to term this, but had his face put on that. I can only imagine how expensive it must be. And Script, if we take a look at what this says, of course, it says that the highest grossing film of the franchise, Crystal Skull, largely due to inflation, hit $790 million worldwide. That's the total box office. Did not break $1 billion, but still impressive for the year that it came out.
Absolutely.
However, if we're looking at just the 2.5 times the budget amount, based on their projections currently, then this fifth film would need to make something like $750 million just to break even, nearly matching the entire total for the highest grossing film in the franchise. And then that's still not taking into consideration that we believe that the total budget is actually higher. So the break even could actually top $800 million. What a huge risk and gambit for Kathleen Kennedy and everybody who's backing her at Lucasfilm to take. What do you make of this?
What I make of this is basically a type of arithmetic that has been plaguing Hollywood since they started realizing that $100 million movie investment would net you anywhere between $450 and $900 million worldwide at the box office. And so now they're trying to say, well, if we double it to 200 million, we'll get closer to $1 billion. And if we double that to 300 million, we'll break $1 billion. But that's not actually the case, because you're playing a numbers game and completely ignoring the fact that people don't care how much a movie costs, because to them, it's the price of a ticket. What they really care is how entertaining is the story, how good is the acting, how much verisimilitude is there on the screen that just allows an audience to get lost in the picture. And I think that's just what we're seeing here. We're seeing almost a prime example of abusive budgetary spending for a pretty significant return. But when you look at it in the books at the end of the day, the return is a lot smaller, because once you factor in all those expenses, once you factor in paying off your lines of credit or loans for a production, plus any interest that accumulated on top of that during the production cycle, once you see that the theaters have their take that they have to get, once you realize how much is going to be lost on any back-end point steals with talent or involved in the production, you end up not getting as much as you would expect had you, say, produced a $50 million movie, or relatively smaller budgets to how the initial 3 Indiana Jones films were paced out. Because if you take a look at those numbers, and remember, advertising and distribution was a lot cheaper in the 80s than it is today, you can see that those movies made way more in profit overall than movies that have been made over the last 10 years.
Sure, and we're not even seemingly talking about marketing yet. That's what's just
exactly
mind-boggling. Well, let's take a look now at WorldofReal.com. This, an article by Jordan Ruemi, coming out on the 15th. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny clocks in at 142 minutes, well over 2 hours. Lots of twos involved, as you said before the video started. Longest Indy movie in the franchise. According to producer Kathleen Kennedy, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has a runtime of 142 minutes. This makes it the longest Indiana Jones film ever. And we have her quote down here: "We're not dealing with a long movie, which may be the first thing that pops into moviegoers' heads. At the same time, a case could be made that pop culture fans are getting used to being in front of the screen for stretches. The reason this is interesting is because long-form storytelling is becoming something that we like in the streaming space. I think it might be that it's some kind of carryover from that." So, Script, do you think that there is some sort of strategy to this that will pay off? Or is this simply an additional limitation placed on the film by the experts, so-called, at Lucasfilm, where this is going to limit the number of screens it can be on because it just has that longer duration?
You know what I think? I think it's a little bit of an artistic hubris over proper marketing, because, again, 1 hour and 42 minutes, that's, 2 hours and 22 minutes.
Lots of twos.
Lots of twos. Is it lots of twos? I want to make sure, because 2 hours is 120 minutes. So yes,
yep, you're on
2 hours, 22 minutes. What do you want to bet that 222 is going to be a significant number in the plot for Dial of Destiny, considering the fact that we're talking about time travel, time dials?
Oh my gosh, come on now. If they padded this movie out just so they could make that symbolism, woof.
Artists do that. And the other part too is that, and this is a tragedy of Hollywood, is that 80% of the people working out there stumble upon the same ideas and the same gimmicks, and they all have their own interpretation how to do that. When it comes to this one here, the long storytelling, they're talking about serialized storytelling, which has been around for a long time. If you've ever watched a soap opera, that's a prime example of it. I mean, they have storylines that go on for many years, if not decades.
Absolutely.
And it works, and there's a market for it. But the thing is, does that work on a platform like streaming? And I would argue, because streaming is a subscriber-based platform, and that's the primary source of revenue, you're actually cutting your potential profit in half, because unlike network television, you don't have commercials and you don't have anyone buying that ad time. Therefore, if you're not selling ad time, you're not making any additional money than what the viewer can offer. And with households, usually
and every extra minute costs money, right? Script. Every minute you're adding, you're just losing money by doing it.
You're just losing, because here's the thing: most households have more than one person in them, and you're only getting one subscriber per household. And if that household has 4 people in it, you're not making any more money than you are with a household that has 10. But when you have a commercial in your air, you've got 10 potential customers you're advertising, and each of them would go out and buy that product that's airing on your show. And if that ends up being scalable, which in most cases it is, because network is still around, then you can then sell to that advertiser the same commercial spot for more, because you can see the numbers that they're getting more sales as a result of that placement. You don't get that with streaming. And therefore, the serialized model isn't working for them. Neither would be the archive library of all their content as well. It's going down the drain. And the fact that they're putting so much money behind this, you're end up spending more than what you make. And when that happens, you go away eventually.
It feels like the gluttony of riches. It feels like Kathleen Kennedy is taking this twilight point of her career, and somehow, whether it was the chaos that was breaking out within the C-suite or whatever, she has managed to just create this absolutely gargantuan budget now that is monstrous, that is uncontrollable. And it feels like a passion project. It feels like something where they just said, throw whatever amount you want. It's one of my last movies or my last movie. And then I'm also looking at the legacy that will be derived from this. So if this movie fails, and by the way, I'm starting to see some things now that indicate to me that this is going to perform better than I had thought previously. We'll talk about that in later videos. But this truly is going to be a movie, I think, that is determined in large part by its second weekend. It seems to me that there is some interest by lots of people to go see this in the first weekend. We'll find out if it holds. It'll largely depend on the quality of the film. But if it doesn't succeed, given just the degree to which they are gambling money and effort and age and all of these things, Script, what do you think would be the fallout if this does not execute well?
I think there'll be a lot of covering or excuses made in the trades to some degree until basically I would say the third weekend. That's when I think the trades would probably turn. I'd be very surprised if many of them were not in support of the film. And I don't begrudge them, because I want this movie to be great too. I think.
Why would you not? I mean, it's Harrison Ford. It's probably his last big action film, surely.
Most definitely. And then on top of that, James Mangold has objectively a pretty solid track record as a filmmaker. So
right, not with fans, but as a creator of art, he's very good. As a creator of drama on the internet, he also is exceedingly good, but not in the right ways.
And that comes to the point. Like, it all comes down to the execution. No creative team is infallible. And on paper, a lot of things look like very promising with regards to this movie. And I really hope that they are, because I would love a 5-part Indiana Jones series where the last movie definitely ends on a high note for everybody. And
we can skip the fourth.
And if you want to, you can skip the fourth. Absolutely.
We know that to that end, the things that I'm seeing right now, the data points that I'm looking at, shows that this is actually, it has a better chance than I originally thought. And so I think there are people who feel that same way that you do. I certainly want to see Harrison Ford, John Williams have that proper swan song. Who wants to see their favorite action figure for decades go out, as a lump? We don't need another Luke Skywalker situation. We want Indy to go out victorious. There are also some things that concern me, given the trailer. But I want to go back to this idea of Kathleen Kennedy and the gamble for a moment, Script.
Sure.
if this doesn't perform as well as it needs, and I don't know what that number would be, but let's say that it's struggling to hit the 750 million mark. Maybe by the third week or third weekend, there's some concern that it's not going to do it. That would be, in my opinion, catastrophic at this point. But do you believe that would actually be the end then of Kathleen Kennedy in terms of the trades covering for her, in terms of them sort of trying to placate the marketplace for Star Wars? Would that be the beginning of the avalanche of people just saying, okay, this can't continue?
I think there's a lot of people out there that would love that to be the case. Sadly, in the industry of Hollywood, I don't think it's going to play out that way.
You still think she would be able to play the Hollywood royalty card, and she will be scot-free from much of the criticisms?
Publicly, absolutely. I mean, again, if it turns out to be otherwise, that's going to be rather telling, because it's essentially saying the industry has turned its back on pretty much the mother that founded the last 40 years of Hollywood. Again, Kathleen Kennedy worked for Amblin, worked for Lucasfilm. She has helped build the careers of a lot of people still working today in this industry, and curried a lot of favors as a result of that. So one big disaster isn't going to isn't going to make people forget about those favors. Heck, the sequel trilogy did not play well among audiences worldwide, despite the fact that it did pull in quite a lot of money. And yeah, like for her, from her perspective, I'm assuming within her world, she probably doesn't see much change in her career prospects it would probably be the same as it was for her 5 years ago, with maybe a little bit more criticism, but she can easily ignore that because there's going to be far more people around her praising her and encouraging her and supporting her than there ever are going to be those that criticize her within her circles.
Sure, in her proximity. All right, so let's, it's only fair that we then look at the converse. So with any gamble, you're clearly making that determination based on the idea that, yes, the risk reward has a reward also on the other side of it. So on the flip side of this coin, let's say that Indiana Jones 5 surpasses expectations, that it is a proper send-off for the character, and that Kathleen Kennedy stands victorious finally with a film that really resonates with fans in the marketplace. Do you think then that this would create some sort of redemption for her and stabilize her control? Even though she is older and we suspect that she has to be reaching retirement age, do you suspect that that would then foment her ability to lead Lucasfilm, at least as far as getting to the fulfillment of this Rey movie and perhaps some other projects that she seems personally invested in?
I strongly think that's the case. Hollywood loves to celebrate a champion as much as they like to admonish a failure. The other part too is that you will, if it does hit a huge success, you will get articles in the trade saying that Kathleen Kennedy has been the secret to Indiana Jones' success since the very beginning.
Well, that will absolutely happen. Do you find it poignant that she started off with Indy and she could potentially end with Indy?
I think that's actually fine. I mean, objectively, just as a producer who got their career started on a franchise, is now heading the production of the last movie, and maybe that's going to be the last thing that they produce or want to produce, to end on a high note, or to just, bring it all together as all good things do. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine. If Kathleen Kennedy said that, hey, I started my career with Indy and this is going to be the last film I produce, and from there I'm going to retire and walk off into the sunset, I would, as a industry professional, I would applaud her for that and say, hey, that's
a great narrative.
It's a great narrative. It's a great thing to do. And if she's definitely giving it her all and her heart's in it, and she wants it to be a wonderful film, just like the one that started this whole franchise, all the more to her. As a fan of as not so much a fan, but as a critic of some of the choices that she's made, and she's announcing her retirement, I'm basically like, I have a sigh of relief. Like, thank goodness she's going away.
Right. The divisiveness can end. That would be a nice thing.
Yes, but I think it's poignant and good for her to want to do that. I don't think it's going to be her last film. Even if she were to retire and maybe she were to leave Lucasfilm, which I don't think is likely to happen in the future, she would still have a lot of free time, and no one really retires in Hollywood exactly. If
you're saying some EP credits may be headed her way in the future.
EP, yeah, she might even start a smaller production company for some art films that she wants to do, because she'll have the connections and free time to get them done. And they may not have anywhere near the advertising as this project she's done with Disney, but she can go somewhere else and make her own little movies, just like Rick McCallum has. No one's heard about him in a while, but he's in Europe and he's producing independent films that many people have not seen.
Having fun, Sometimes it's not about the market response. Sometimes it's about the creative juices, the flow, if you will.
Exactly.
Script, let's end this way. We did a video this morning on the Mandalorian season finale. Of course, it seems like gambles are happening all across Lucasfilm in terms of what they want to try to do, take some big swings with the fans in a number of franchises. But in terms of Indiana Jones, just from your own personal preferences, what would you like to see? What notes would you like to see played in this film? What touches would you like to see in the script to sort of close off this adventure, close off this hero, and give us the satisfying ending that he so richly deserves?
I think a great ending for Indiana Jones would be a little counter to what a lot of the fans think. So many fans think that the heroes need to die in a blaze of glory and what have you. I think it'd be very fitting that at the end of his adventure, because we know the trailer sets up that he's retiring from teaching. I think from the end of his adventure, it would be him going back to class and saying, you know what, I'm going to still teach these young kids the value of archaeology and history, because it's what makes my life have meaning. And maybe I'm not old enough to go on the adventure, but I can at least inspire a whole bunch of younger generation to do what I did, because teaching and knowledge and understanding the value of history is just as important as making it. That's how I would kind of like to end. That
would be the Rocky Balboa affirmation, even as one gets older story, correct?
Yes, pretty much. I think that's a great parallel to bring. Yes.
Yeah, well, I would definitely like to see that movie. So hopefully that's the one which will be rendered unto us. Script, thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us, talking about this great franchise that so many love. And it's put people sort of, in these odd camps. There are people who want this movie to fail because they want Kathleen Kennedy to fail, and yet they love this franchise, and they just don't know what to do with, how they want things to work out with it. And they fear that if this does well, then Kathleen Kennedy does well, and they certainly don't want that. So it's an odd topic, and it's an odd place to be for both the franchise, the property, Lucasfilm, Kennedy, etc. Thank you for helping us make sense of it, Script. Where can people find you on this great, big, beautiful web out there?
You can find me on Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD. You can find me on YouTube.com/ScriptDoctor, where I will be having a video dropped this Saturday, the 22nd of April, if you're watching a little bit in the future. And I also have a Patreon where I talk about screenwriting and reviews and give out writing tips and discounts on my script consulting packages for any writers out there that need a little extra help getting their story completed.
Excellent. Folks, if you have not yet checked out Script Doctor's material, if you have not yet went and subscribed, I highly recommend you do. I think you're going to be very pleased with the content. Folks, drop a comment down below. We covet your comments. This is not just a dialogue between two people, but this is a conversation with all of you. And if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about the notification bell. The Pro Show, Thursdays, 5 to 7 Eastern Time. That's in the evening, not in the AM. None of us are waking up that early. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.